this attitude of we die here.
All right, gentlemen, let's move on quickly. The art of negotiation is described as finding mutually beneficial solutions. However, it seems the conversations around a new minimum wage for workers are far from over. Organized Labour has rejected the proposal of the Southern Governors Forum on decentralization of the minimum wage negotiations to state level. Labour says allowing state governors to determine the minimum wage will be detrimental to the welfare of workers across the country. Ade, do you agree?
Well, I think, first of all, we have said it here over and over again, that there is even though there are disagreements, but there is something we all agree on. The need for worker salary to go up from 30,000 naira. I don't know what anybody can use 30,000 naira to do these days, when one pint of tomatoes is going for 15,000 as of today. And I'm not sure what the price will be by tomorrow. So prices of food items, essential food items that human beings cannot do without, they have gone beyond the reach of a Nigerian. So we all agree that there's a need for salaries to go up. But as rational human beings, we must also be very critical that this increase, what will be the implications for the workers and also for the government. In what way are we going to increase this salary that will not be counterproductive, that will not lead to hyperinflation, that will not lead to loss of jobs, that will not lead to a lot of unforeseen consequences. You know, probably you'll be traveling from Lagos to Abuja, you'll be asked to go and pay 50,000 naira. So we need to sit down and look at these issues thoroughly. And that's why we're saying both sides should come with figures to convince, put it in the court of public opinion, so that when you are swaying arguments, people will be able to understand your position. I understand what Labour is saying, that, okay, we want to defend the principle of collective bargaining. That's a form of strength for them. But the reality also is that the objective conditions, subjective conditions in every state differ. What Ekiti State gets as IGR, the number of civil servants in Ekiti State, the number of workers is not the same as what you have in Zamfara State. It's also the same with what you have in Sokoto State or Lagos State. The cost of transportation, if you go to Ibadan, you can still get transportation for 50 naira. I'm even shocked. You can even still buy food in Ibadan, 200 naira. Because it's a traditional society where people still do subsistence farming. But you can't do that in Lagos. You know, so each state has its own peculiar circumstances. And that's why state governors cannot be taken away from the broad spectrum of the negotiation. They need to be involved based on what they receive from the federal government, what they can afford to pay. I don't think it's something that we can wish out. So I respect that opinion that state governors, they are critical stakeholders in determining what they can pay for workers in their own state based on what they get at the end of the day. And Labour at each state level should also be part of that negotiation, because they are the civil servants. They know what each state governors get from the federal government. They know what the governor spends on security vote. They are the one that sign out the memo, take it from one table to the other. So they are in a position to know whether, for instance, Kwara State can pay this particular amount or not. So I think we need to look for a balance to appreciate and understand each other. That you cannot wish away Labour, you can also not wish away state governments. They need and also the federal government. They need to work together to arrive at a common position. All
right, BKO. Labour says governors taking over this negotiation will turn them to beggars.
I don't think that Labour can even, governors can take over the negotiations. It's a tripartite thing. And the federal government is leading the negotiation on the part of the federal government and the federating units. So then Labour stands alone, and the organized private sector stands alone. So the federal government has two caps. It's representing the state governments and it's representing itself. So governors can't take over the negotiation. But I get the argument of the NLC And I've said before that we have to decide what kind of minimum wage. We have to probably take a second look at the minimum wage law. The suggestion by some governors that states should pay what they can afford is unconstitutional. That's not what the law says. What the law says is that there shall be a minimum wage below which no employer of labor shall be permitted to go. So once you have that situation, it doesn't matter whether you are part of organized private sector or you are federal government or you are state government, you must adhere to the minimum wage law. That's why we take it to the National Assembly. The National Assembly adopts and the president gives his assent. Once the president gives his assent, it becomes law.
Well, Vicky, nothing has been happening to those governors who have been paying below 30,000.
Yes, that was why I also said on this program that we must not turn this to a farce. We must not turn it to a joke, whereby labor will insist that, oh, it has to be 250,000, it has to be 400 and something thousand. You know, they came from very high. And I said, if you can actually push the federal government to pay, you can embarrass and harass Bola Ahmed Tinubu to pay a certain amount, but you have no guarantee that those governors can pay. Ideally, what the law says is that the Minister of Labor shall be the implementer-in-chief of the minimum wage, which means it is his responsibility to ensure that everyone, every employer of labor, including state governors, because they are the employers of labor in the public service of their states, his duty, his or her duty now, is to ensure that they all obey the law. So we can't, without amending that law, we can't be suggesting that, oh, let every state pay what it can pay. The only way you can have that conversation is if the law has been amended. No, you can't say let every state pay the minimum wage that it can pay. It is called national minimum wage for a reason. So governors, if they want this minimum wage regime to change, they must be prepared to approach the National Assembly to change the minimum wage law, so that you then, from state to state, you can have your own minimum wage. You can peg your minimum wage. Even in America, we have states who pay above the national average. States like Massachusetts, for example, they pay above the national average. So states pay based on the strengths that they have. But our law, just that the same law before the deregulation of petroleum prices, just that the same law says, okay, you sell petrol at the same price nationally across the country. And when we knew that that was impracticable, we then came up with Petroleum Equalization Fund. And we started paying tanker drivers bridging claims. So the extra costs that they bear to ensure that we are able to sell petrol at the same equilibrium level across our country is maintained. So you pay them extra money for driving all the way. You know, some of them will be on the road for more than a week to take petroleum products all the way to the north, because we want petrol to be sold at the same price across our country. That was the regulation. But today, you can see that it's not happening. And for a long time, even in the southeast, they were not selling at the price of Lagos. In some states in the north, they were not selling at the price of Lagos, because these associated costs continue to mount. So we find it difficult to have a national petrol pricing template in the real sense of the word. So I believe that we'll get to that, because this debate, you cannot squash this debate. States like Rivers, like Lagos, like Ogun, what they can pay, because they generate, and even FCT, let me not forget, because FCT now is next to Lagos in terms of IGR, what those ones can afford to pay, Zamfara cannot afford to pay. Ekiti may not be able to pay. The number of civil servants vary from state to state. States like Benue, states like Oyo, states like Lagos, they have a very high number of civil servants. The more civil servants you have, the higher your wage bill as a state. So all of these factors, if you put all of these factors together, you then see that it is not right to imagine that all hands are equal, that all states will be able to pay. So maybe an amendment to the law. But to simply think that without an amendment to the law, the states, those governors shouldn't even be making that kind of, having that kind of conversation, because they know that the law stipulates that it must be the same national minimum wage that everybody pays. Now, as you said, people are not complying. That's why I think that at some point we have to amend that law to permit states to pay what they can afford. So people will even migrate from state to state. If they say that, let me go and work in Lagos. So that's people who can provide skilled labor, not artisanal. Let me not even.
All right, anyway, this new debate, this new conversation, does it have the tendency to drag us backward and erode the success or the efforts we've made so far?
If we manage it in a very honest way, if the governors are ready to shed the weight of what they pay, to place their priority right, I think this is a momentum era that we should realize that we need to do something about workers' wages, and that we should do it with the best of intentions. So I agree with what Babajide has said, that law is part of it's one of the fault lines of our federalism, because the states are just not equal in strength. And I think the NSC should also realize that we need to work towards amending that law. Do you know that even this 30,000 naira, some states are not paying? Are not. So it's one thing for you to say, okay, minimum wage is going to be 70,000 naira, but some states, they will just ignore it. Then you start going to court and all that. So we need to be realistic and work together, have a minimum wage for the state, below which no state must pay, anything that is less than that. So I hope we have to resolve this quickly before it gets out of hand.
All right, gentlemen, let's move on to our final.